My name is Beth Nybeck, and I'm a sculptor living and working in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm talking a little bit about this Flight of Ideas. It's a new installation in the John Wayne International Airport in Orange County, California. My partner, Dick Job, and I won this national call for artists this last January of 2011, and we've been working on the project for the last 8 or 9 months. And so this is a little bit of our story. When I first heard about this specific call for artists, I was pretty excited. It was a new space and an interesting project, something that was suspended, which was unusual for me. And so I decided to give it a shot. I thought I could come up with something interesting and exciting for the project. So I started to think a lot about flight and the history of flight, aviation, how ideas are spread from one person to another, and things like that. When I was first coming up with ideas for this project, part of me was nervous because this was a larger project than I'd ever taken on before. And so I asked my mentor, Dick Job, if he wanted to come on the project with me, partner with me, and he agreed. He thought it'd be a great idea. And so together for the last 6 months, he and I have been working on fabrication and engineering and brainstorming and really working together as a team to bring this very large project together. My inspiration for the Flight of Ideas kind of all started with my infatuation for inventors and innovators. I've always been really curious and love stories about people who dream big, because those are the people who have shaped and formed our world. And I get a lot of inspiration from hearing about their stories, because oftentimes you'll hear stories about so many times somebody has failed and failed and failed, and then they keep trying and they succeed, or stories about something that they've tried to do and they figured out something else in the process. And I thought a lot about, how do we share our ideas with each other? How does somebody get an idea and say, hey, I'm going to share it with you, and you're going to share it with you, and pretty soon, 3 or 4 people have wrapped themselves around an idea. These are stories and people who bring inspiration to our world. They're the people who have changed our world, who develop our world, who shape our world into what it is today. And so that's kind of how I started to think about this process. And I also brought in, since it's an airport, dealing with the history of aviation, and thought, how do I illustrate how aviation kind of came to be? And so I started thinking about the Wright brothers and how they and many other people kind of watched birds, watched how they flew, and studied their bodies, and through trial and error over many years figured out how to get men up in the air. And so these birds are formed, the bodies themselves look like actual birds, but their wings are derivative off of the first biplane and glider designs. And then on the actual wings, we have these plastic infill panels, is what I call them. And they have aviation maps printed directly onto the wings. And that's what pilots, small engine pilots anyway, look at when they fly. The sculpture is a flock of these birds, 21 of them flying through this terminal space. So this project talks a lot about the transfer of ideas and flight, but it also speaks to kind of all the different things that are flying in the air, where people are going, and travel, and maps, and planning vacations and business, and all of those different things are kind of all wrapped around in this project. And that's where it started, and it hangs today. We just got back from a great trip out to Orange County, California to install the Flight of Ideas. We were out there for 2 weeks, and it was really interesting to see this art piece in its final finished product for the first time. One of the most interesting parts of this project was being in the space. This is the first time I had been in this airport space with the artwork there, and it was kind of a surreal experience of, this is actually happening, and wow, this place is really big. Day 1 started really early on Monday morning when my partner, Dick Job, and our crew arrived at the scene of the John Wayne Airport, and we started by unloading the semi. The first part of the installation was getting our big truss form installed and assembled. The major problem or hurdle per se of doing this was there were already the baggage claim carousels in place. So our big wide open floor space that would have been ideal was non-existent. So we had to build up a whole level of scaffolding that the truss had to sit on top of. So that was a tricky challenge that we had to kind of overcome and build this long 100-foot truss in place. After the truss was assembled on the floor, on the scaffolding, they had to drill 52 holes within the ceiling members in order for the ceiling to support this big long truss. And so as we were waiting for the holes to be drilled, we were working on the assembling of the birds. There's 21 of them, and they were all broken into many different pieces. And so the assembling of the wings and the birds, and also those beautiful vinyl plastic infill panels, attaching those as well. A unique part of this process and this project in particular was the fact that the terminal we were working in was still under construction as this art piece was being installed. So as the week went on from our arrival to our departure, the construction workers on site got to see this thing unfold. And it was really interesting talking with the different construction workers who, some of them would just kind of walk by and give that look of, I wonder what's going on, and others would stop and say, hey, what's going on here? And every day they'd check in and see what the update was. And so that was a really unique and interesting part of this project. Once the 52 holes were drilled into the ceiling, everything was given the green light, go ahead, let's get this in the air. And so it took a couple days for the construction crew to really rig the truss into a point where it was there were 3 or 4 different chain hoists all hooked to the truss, but they all hooked back to kind of one central controlling device. It's kind of like a remote control airplane, if you will. And so I got to be around to see this all happen, and then the moment came where this thing was going to be lifted up, and they handed the controller to me and said, you want to do this, right? And I was like, yeah, I do. And so I got to hang on to this huge box and, press up and just watch this whole thing just get lifted 30 or 40 feet up in the air. Was just an incredible moment in and of itself. Once the truss was up in the air, the construction crews kind of clipped it into place. There were all of these different wire suspended supporting braces, and they had to hook it into many different places. So once it was secure, all the birds could go up. And this was an interesting part of the process because I really got to know the construction crew well, because they were the only ones certified to be in the lift at one time. And so I didn't get to actually go on the lift with them, but I got to know them well and got to instruct them from the ground, hey, turn that this way, or that's positioned wrong, or different things like that, or looks great, come on down. It was an interesting process of instructing them because they're used to working with big, heavy stuff, and now all of a sudden they had these white little gloves on and they're handling art, and they really didn't know how to wrap their mind around it. But afterwards they said, this is a really, really neat project, and we're really glad to be a part of it. So we had an interesting bond there. But after all of these birds were up, it took a couple days to have all of them in place and adjusted the right way, and it was quite the moment to be underneath it after that last bird was hung, and to really kind of take it in was an experience I really don't have words for. When creating all of these birds in the shop, we came up with all these different bird jokes, like we're just winging it, or we're getting pretty birdie today, or everything kind of evolved around these birds. And so we came up with all of these bird calls. So whenever one of us would walk into the studio, we'd have all these different kind of bird sounds that we would make, and so they'd be like caw, caw, or tweet, tweet. And our last one, we asked, somebody else came into the shop and we said, we're doing bird calls, do you have one? And he thought for a moment, he's like, yeah, whippoorwill. And so it was always tweet, tweet, caw, caw, whippoorwill, and those were our bird calls. The last day I spent with the birds was an interesting one. People kept calling in and checking in with me and saying, how you doing? Does it look great? And I was very excited, but I had another emotion there that was a strange emotion. I went to the airport for the last time and really kind of looked at all of these birds and kind of saying my last kind of farewell wishes to them, and the end of my flight but the beginning of theirs. And it was really kind of hard. You know, other sculptors would say to me, you know, watch out, it's gonna go really great, but it's also gonna be really hard. And I didn't know what they meant until that last day when I had to walk away from the project, and it was like leaving a piece of my heart there, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I didn't expect it to be this hard. But it was a beautiful moment, but also kind of a, wow, this is beautiful, this is wonderful, but also, whew, okay, all right, next project. But the whole thing was a great opportunity and a collaborative process to work with a bunch of fantastic people, and looking forward to the next one.